The Compliance Perspectives podcast is sponsored by Athena, customizable compliance training, an employee hotline, and case management all in one tool. Welcome to the Compliance Perspectives podcast. I'm Adam Turteltaub from the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics in Healthcare Compliance Association. Joining us today from Nashville is Shirley. Mary is Vice President, Chief Compliance and Privacy Officer at Scion Health. And today we're going to be talking about an issue that compliance people often see in their career and one that she's fortunately not seeing where she is now, which is management that isn't really taking compliance seriously. It's a huge problem for the compliance team and potentially for the organization. So, Mary, thanks for taking on this difficult topic. First, I have to ask, are there some red flags you've seen that the organization really isn't committed to compliance?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Adam. Thank you. And what I would say is that there are some red flags, but in and of themselves, just one thing or a couple of things may not be enough to say that it's a problem culture at the top. However, I think the more red flags you see, the more indicative it is. So a couple of the big ones are the title and standing of the senior most individual doing the day-to-day practice of compliance is relatively low, and they don't have much authority within the organization. They're not considered to be in a leadership position. When compliance is one person, with benchmarking, and you can get that from SCCE, HCCA, showing that, in fact, the team should be bigger. That can be an indicator as well, although I would urge you to be a little more gracious in situations where the company may not be doing so well financially, and it makes sense to have a leaner team for that legitimate reason. And if it's a one-person situation, despite that, if there's no budget for external assistance to help the one internal resource, that could be problematic too. If there's just about no appetite to act on the most basic or inexpensive recommendations that the compliance department provides, that wouldn't be a heavy lift for leaders to take up. If leadership never refers compliance to their own people, that is a problem. Leadership never references or participates in compliance initiatives. There is a lack of support for compliance practitioners to get professional development. Major deals or transactions where, for example, you might have needed to do due diligence or some other compliance action needs to be taken, but you only find out after the fact. You're directed to substantively rewrite key documents like audit reports and risk assessment documentation. And finally, the person with ultimate responsibility for the compliance function and program has no actual background or experience in compliance, and they make decisions based on their own intuition without regard to relevant authority.
Those are a scary list of possibilities there, and you're right. I can see how one or two may be a little bit troubling, but once you start layering them one on top of the other, it's a really bad look. So let's say you're a compliance officer, you're facing all of these issues or part of some of them. How do you decide whether to stay and fight it out, or it's time to just walk out the door?
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of situations where we can work through issues in the workplace, where we can negotiate in our minds that the benefits outweigh the disadvantages. But I think this situation is one that just isn't going to improve unless the leadership changes over. So, in the absence of signs that that is going to happen, I think the person is really stuck with the option of having to look elsewhere and look for a better culture in another organization that takes compliance more seriously.
And, sometimes it is time to just say it's not going to work and go, whether you're in compliance or other jobs as well. Now, even if you do decide to leave, you probably can't do so right away. You need to find another job for yourself, most likely. What do you do to help start turning things around before you go? Or is it sort of hopeless?
I think there are a number of things that you can do with different purposes. So, on the one hand, you want to essentially protect yourself in the compliance space. So, documenting your efforts, especially where mitigation strategies to address high risk transactions and arrangements were pushed back. So, noting those down. And then getting some joy where you can find it. So getting the traction for compliance in the organization, it may not be as big a ripple effect as you'd like it to be, but looking for those hidden upstanders in the business. There are always some good eggs in every organization, and they're so hopeful that somebody will come in and turn things around. And so you can help those small pockets that you find, and they'll also be your allies, leading you to more good eggs in the organization. For your own benefit, I would recommend staying up to date on your professional development to the extent that you can with resources that are freely available. And thanks to technology being such an equalizer, we get many things that are available to us without cost. And then for small cost ones that you're really interested in going to, but you can't get company support for, ask yourself whether you might consider paying for it on your own dime. We call it professional development, but I like to think of it as personal development because you take the skills with you no matter where you go. And sometimes it can be worth it to get what you need and not just be on principle saying, well, the company's not going to pay, so I'm going to miss out. Work on your compliance skill set to the extent that you can. So maybe drafting internal policies for the compliance department, working on your risk assessment methodology. In other words, keeping your skills sharp in the areas where you can. The best time to build your network is before you need it. But if you've not done that, the best time to start is now. So work on those relationships, and you never know, you might just find a new friend who's in the exact same boat and have someone to commiserate and strategize with. Let your contacts who you have networked with confidentially know that you're looking to move on so that they can be on the lookout for you, maybe within their own companies, maybe externally through the contacts and network that they have. I find that usually the default position with people that we know is that we assume that they're happy with they are, unless they've overtly said otherwise. So unless you share and pass on the message that you're looking to leave, people are not necessarily going to think of you proactively to tap you on the shoulder if they hear of a role that would suit you.
That's great advice. You mentioned something earlier on about protecting yourself. How do you ensure that you do protect yourself in situations like this?
So I would just emphasize that this is not intended to be legal advice, not a lawyer here, but I think documenting is one of the best ways in which you can go about that. So noting down if you've given advice and if it was declined, noting that information down as well. So the advice that you gave and who the individuals were and the timing around when it was declined, and if there was a reason provided for why they decided not to go in that direction.
So finally, when looking to your next new opportunity, what do you need to ask during the interview process to ensure that they are truly serious about compliance and ethics?
Yeah, I strongly believe that you never know what a culture is truly going to be like until you're in the thick of it. So I don't think you can ever ensure that you're not going to be in a bad situation. But I think that there are some questions to ask that may help get some indicators for you. So one of my favorites is from Alan Hunt, which is, what do people get fired for here? A great one to tell you what's important to the organization, what will result in disciplinary action. Would it be possible to speak to the person outgoing from this position and get a reverse reference check from them? So speaking to the predecessor is a good way to get some hopefully unfiltered feedback and hopefully balanced as well. Asking them what specifically they would like to see improved in the compliance function within the next 6 months after the person that they hire joins. So ideally, you're going to want to hear some very concrete things that they see as areas of opportunity that need to be worked on, and you feel clear and comfortable with what their expectations are. asking them how to describe the company's risk appetite. So that's a little bit personal in terms of what your own risk appetite is, but it can be a little troublesome, I think, or not the greatest sign if they don't necessarily know what their risk appetite is. Maybe you'll see that as a positive and think you can help support in that area. I would ask whether colleagues would say that management, including executive leadership, is held to the same standards as other staff. I would also want to know what deliverables from the compliance department have been rewarded in the past year and in what way. I think it's interesting to find out what types of internal meetings compliance is invited to attend. In other words, you're wanting to understand, do you actually have a seat at the table? What professional development opportunities did the company send the compliance team to last year? So getting an understanding as to whether it's considered important enough from a budget standpoint to provide professional development opportunities to the compliance team. Asking how many full-time dedicated compliance staff are on the team. And I would urge you to be very specific with this. So if they start talking about, for example, compliance liaisons wearing the compliance hat, rather than directly answering the question about dedicated compliance staff, I think you'll want to press further about that. And finally, finding out how much travel is typically involved in the role, and you can break it down into asking about specifically for investigations, training, pressing palms and kissing babies, and for compliance week activities. So ideally, compliance is going to be out there in the field, meeting people, getting to see them in an environment that is not just a training or an investigation, that they get to be well known to the business. Those are the types of things that I think will be helpful, but not a guarantee in terms of trying to avoid a terrible culture in the future.
Well, Mary, thanks for that wisdom, which I know was hard fought for in your career. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen. I'm Adam Turteltaub from SCCE and HCCA. I hope we're able to expand your compliance perspective.